I confess that I was surprised when I received the invitation to speak here tonight. I mean, I knew they weren't approaching me as an international sex symbol, right? Then Olivier told me that they wanted to try boring at this year's dinner, and I said, oh, I can deliver on that big time.
A historian, not a comedian, headlined this weekend's White House Correspondents' Dinner. Ron Chernow has written critically acclaimed biographies of George Washington and Alexander Hamilton, with the latter, of course, serving as the inspiration for the hit Broadway musical. On Saturday night, Chernow addressed the Washington Press Corps and took some jabs at President Trump in the process.
As you all know, on Tuesday, the president let it be known that he wanted members of his administration to stay away from this dinner. And at first, I was puzzled by this news. But then I learned that a rumor was circulating in Washington that I was going to be reading aloud from the redacted portions of the Mueller report, and everything was explained. Now, as best I can tell, Washington committed only one major blunder as president. He failed to put his name on Mount Vernon and thereby bungled an early opportunity at branding. Clearly deficient in the art of the deal, the poor man had to settle for the lowly title of father of his country. A very sad story. Alexander Hamilton, an immigrant who arrived, thank God, before the country was full. I don't know why they let the guy in. Clearly somebody had slipped up at the southern border. As we head into another election season, I will leave you with one final gem from Twain. Politicians in diapers must be changed often, and for the same reason. Good night, and God bless America.
Chernow's most recent book examines the life of our 18th president, Ulysses S. Grant. As a young man, Grant had been a mediocre cadet at West Point. During the Mexican War, he fought bravely, but was later asked to resign from the Army because of his severe drinking problem. In civilian life, he failed in most of his endeavors. Yet, despite this less than remarkable past, he became by far the greatest general fighting for the Union during the Civil War. He went on to serve 2 terms as president, but his presidency was marred by scandal and corruption. I had the opportunity to speak with Ron Chernow shortly after the biography's publication and began the conversation by asking him to separate Grant fact from Grant fiction.
I really try to retire 3 chief myths. You know, number 1, that he was a crude and brutal general. 2, that he somehow stumbled through the Civil War in an alcoholic haze. And 3, that he oversaw a failed presidency that was marred by corruption and cronyism. And I discovered that all 3 of those stereotypes were completely wrong.
But you know, his closest associates, or many of his closest associates, who've been with him for years, they themselves didn't understand this guy, this seemingly so typical, normal guy, could be so unbelievably successful at war. You discovered the secret?
Well, you know, it's interesting because quite unlike the other people that I've written about, whom I felt were built for success, you know, Grant, up until the time of the Civil War, has, you know, suffered one business failure after another. In the 1850s, he's reduced to selling firewood on street corners in St. Louis.
It was pathetic.
Yeah,
I had no idea he had sunk so low.
Yeah, he actually has to pawn his watch one Christmas to buy gifts for his family. And finally, he's reduced, and he's in his late 30s at this point. Right on the eve of the Civil War, he's reduced to going to his father, who owned a leather goods store in Galena, Illinois, and begging for a job as a clerk. He takes a job as a clerk, junior to his 2 younger brothers. You can imagine what a humiliation that was. And then this man who had failed at one thing after another, the Civil War breaks out. 2 months later, he's a colonel. 4 months later, he's a brigadier general. 10 months later, he's a major general. And then this, you know, failed leather goods store clerk, by the end of the war, is general-in-chief and has 1 million soldiers under his command.
It's unbelievable. Do you know any other figure in American history or history anywhere that has such a contrasting life?
No, not such lows. You know, Raphael, there's a quality to this book that's unlike anything that I've written before, and it's pathos. It's a story of a fundamentally decent, hardworking man who was repeatedly defeated by circumstances. And it turned out that he required a kind of narrow set conditions for all of these wonderful hidden traits to.
What were some of those traits?
Well, you know, an amazing perseverance and daring. I think because he'd had so much failure before the Civil War, when the war breaks out, he has nothing to lose and everything to gain, and he takes these colossal risks that all of these well-born generals, you know, would not.
Let's talk about the comparison of Grant and Lee.
Well, this is very, very interesting because Ulysses S. Grant captures 3 Confederate armies during the war. Fort Donelson in Tennessee in 1862, Vicksburg, Mississippi, 1863.
Brilliant campaign.
And then most famously, Robert E. Lee's army at Appomattox Courthouse in 1865. Robert E. Lee never captured a single Union army, so why should Lee be considered the greater general? So all, you know, these people who say, well, it was simply the population of the North was larger, it was the manufacturing power of the North. Before Grant faces off against Lee in Virginia in 1864, there have been 6 generals who tried to defeat Lee, all of whom failed with the same advantages of manpower and material that Grant had. So Grant was a dazzling strategist.
Yeah. You know, and talking about that, Grant believed with Lincoln that the proper path to end the war or after the war was to be magnanimous with the Confederacy, and including the top military leaders, which is why he was so generous to Lee at Appomattox. But as history proved, that was incompatible with creating a South, with fundamentally transforming the South into a place that was truly free, truly equal, and truly safe for Black Americans.
I mean, you put your finger on, you know, what's the central paradox of Grant's life, because his terms are so magnanimous, he's so generous at Appomattox Courthouse, that Grant at that point becomes the great symbol of North-South reconciliation. He refuses to allow his men to celebrate. He refuses to enter Richmond, which was the capital of the Confederacy after it fell. His wife, Julia, wanted him to go, and he said, Julia, don't you understand how bitter defeat is for these people?
Talk about his presidency, the failures and the triumphs of his presidency.
Well, first the failures. I mean, there were scandals. You know, this is not something invented by his enemies. There were a lot of scandals. The scandals did not involve him personally. He did not condone them. He prosecuted them vigorously. I was talking before about how naive Grant could be. He was very blind to the machinations of people in his immediate vicinity. But what I try to show in the book is that those scandals, though real and worth talking about, were the minor story of his administration. His effort to crush the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, Grant's Justice Department brings 3,000 indictments against the Klan. His efforts to protect the African-American community, the fact that he became the most important president for the African-American community between Abraham Lincoln and Lyndon Johnson. This seems to me kind of, for us as a country, much bigger and more important story.
Right. Yeah. All right, Ron. It's a really wonderful book. There's so much in here. We just began to touch the surface. Grant by Ron Chernow. Ron, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Phil. Thank you.